virgin. Nice. Hey, we're gonna pop your cherry. Together. Gonna be gentle.
Man of Medan is the first installment of Season 1 in the Dark Pictures anthology. After the success of Until Dawn, Supermassive saw a market for interactive drama horror games and planned to accelerate the release of them as part of the Dark Pictures series. It continues the tradition of player choices leading to characters surviving or dying, which means a lot of variance on the kill count depending on those decisions. Like my Until Dawn video, I'll play the game naturally and include my own personal kill count while highlighting the moments where characters can die or survive that may not be present in my playthrough. At the end, I'll include a minimum and a maximum kill count alongside my own ending. There's a small cast of characters with plenty of ways to die, so let's dive in and see how many lives are claimed by the ghost ship.
Death? Wait, what? What does that mean? Hey, what does that mean?
The game begins in 1947 as we watch some caskets get loaded onto a ship when it cuts to our first playable character Joe and his war buddy Charlie getting their drink on in a nearby market. Before going back to the ship, Joe asks about his son at a fortune teller and instead gets a warning of death and doom, which he brings directly to this training dummy. They stumble towards the ship while we witness more cargo being loaded onto it, but this one is much more mysterious. Charlie suddenly remembers Joe took 50 cents from him and he wants to give him his 2 cents. However, this sergeant has been looking to throw some haymakers for days and sends Joe into Slumberland and Charlie into the brig. The ship departs into a heavy storm that gives them a little bit of lightning, which travels throughout the ship and causes the cargo to shard itself. We cut back to Joe, who wakes up with no one around and winds up finding the first kill on the count when he opens the locker in the corner and uncovers a doctor's body. He grabs the key next to him and uses that to unlock the door so he can free Charlie from the brig. He claims to have heard airplanes and gunfire and wants to know what's going on, so they set out to figure that out together. Before they get too far, a panicked soldier runs by them, initiating the first heartbeat section of the game that replaces the don't move portions of Until Dawn, which I'm thankful for since those are definitely my least favorite events of that game. Regardless of whether this is passed or failed, the soldier will move on so Joe can experience some strange shit like the rest of them. As the two soldiers explore the ship, Joe will begin seeing a kid running in the shadows, while we start noticing some green fog puff up by their feet with each step. They encounter 7 soldiers who have either been shot and killed or appear to have died from fright. After examining the murder scene, they hear yelling down the corridor and pick up some weapons, but in the next cargo hold, Joe sees the kid again and Charlie apparently dead, but I won't count him quite yet because by now it's clear something is making these men hallucinate. Joe can't handle his son's scary ass face no mo and his heart gives out, adding the 9th kill to the count. What follows is a series of scenes showing the ship descending into chaos as a sailor calls for help and dies of fright after a multi-limbed shadow enters the room, and a soldier getting thrown overboard directly onto one of their lifeboats, giving him an ironic death since those were supposed to save lives. It cuts to the opening credits as Kimness's kick-ass A Conversation with Death plays. It's here we're introduced to the curator for the first time, who was modeled after the late Tony Pankhurst and physically played and voiced by Pip Torrens, who doesn't have many video game credits, but he did do the voice of frickin' Radon in Elden Ring. The curator, like Dr. Hill in Until Dawn, serves as the narrator throughout the series. His concept was based on the typical horror series host like the Crypt Keeper or Rod Serling, but instead of simply being a host, he's loosely involved in the overall narrative. He tells us what we already know, informing the player that our decisions matter and can lead to life or death. But he's here to assist if needed and can provide hints if we want. We skip forward to 2019 in French Polynesia, with Brad meeting his older brother Alex on the Duke of Milan with some bruise in tow. He admits he hasn't bothered to take any diving lessons, which pisses his brother right off. He warns him if he's not cool, he'll make both of them seem uncool to the super rich Julia and Conrad. He admits to being on edge due to med school and that his long distance relationship with Julia has been rough.
It's been like 2 weeks.
Alex wants some brotherly advice on a big life decision he doesn't elaborate on, and Brad just wants his bitchy older brother to stop talking and tells him to think on it and fuck off. Julia and her brother Conrad arrive bringing the party.
Tight. I love beer.
The final member of the crew is Fliss, the captain of the ship and victim of Conrad's advances. Out of all the characters in the game, Conrad is the only one who is modeled after and played by the same actor. Shawn Ashmore, who many will recognize as Iceman in the original X-Men movies, is no stranger to acting in video games. He's teamed up with Remedy a couple times as the lead in Quantum Break, and more recently Tim Breaker in my personal Game of the Year in 2023, Alan Wake 2. He admits to loving these types of games, and after playing Until Dawn, sprung long at the opportunity to join Supermassive's next venture into the genre with Man of Medan. Shortly after they get on the water, Brad is feeding the fishes with the contents of his stomach, while Alex and Fliss discuss potential diving spots if their first choice is a bust. But due to Brad's calculations, they successfully located a World War II airplane that he was somehow able to uncover, and Fliss recommends they report it to Port Authority as an unreported wreck. But they chastise her for being a fucking square. While Julia does her checks on the diving equipment, Alex checks on his brother to make sure he's okay. Gets a premonition at the painting on the wall, which works similarly to the totems in Until Dawn, then notices Fliss's counterfeit license before listening to Julia complain about Fliss being so by the books. He uses some binoculars to make sure there's enough water for diving, then disassociates while Julia explains what a rebreather does. They're ready to dive, but first they need to snap a photo, and Julia really forces that smile there. They finally get started, and Conrad takes the opportunity to make us and Fliss uncomfortable. After getting denied, some silly little idiots come flying up on a speedboat, but there's a lot of traffic, so they wind up bumping Fliss's boat and complain about the damage. Fliss yells at them for their recklessness because there are divers in the water, and Conrad really emphasizes the second half of his name when he offers to pay for the damage by making $10 bills rain into the ocean. While he dishes out some disrespect, Julia and Alex enter the wreckage, finding evidence of the plane being shot down and claiming 3 lives, which I will count since it occurred off-screen during the prologue. Alex snatches a document before another treasure hunter claims it, and from there elect to swim towards the boat where they need to decompress before surfacing. But as they approach, they spot the other boat taking off, followed by an explosion. Julia panics and wants to skip decompression, which can have some major consequences later if she does. But she listens to Alex and my game, and waits a few more seconds before finding out Conrad just doesn't know how to work a grill. They ask about the other boat, and Conrad says it was nothing, before the game puts us back with the curator, who compliments my sick gaming skills and puts me back with the group. Julia and Alex get all lovey-dovey about their future.
We've got a long and happy future together.
Yeah, we'll see about that. They bring up the document they found in the wreckage, talking about some Manchurian gold that contains coordinates not too far from their location. They ask Fliss about maybe checking it out and having a Nathan Drake-style adventure, but she's peeved at these arrogant Americans for disrespecting the dead and doing whatever the hell they want. They barely even acknowledge her concerns, and instead ask Brad to tell a fucking ghost story, which ends with him turning into a ghost for a second. Fliss thinks everyone should turn in for the night as a T-storm heads their way. But with the night comes company. The pirates board the boat and take everyone captive while they sleep, except for Brad initially, who is able to hide for a bit, but eventually gets found anyway. Fliss blames Conrad's little strip club routine for bringing them back, and Alex thinks Fliss is working with the pirates. But regardless of blame, this scene can work out a few different ways. Eventually, Conrad has a decision to make. Either jump on the pirate speedboat to escape and find help, or go in for a sneak attack. I elected for the sneak attack, which just ends in failure. However, if you have Conrad go for the boat, you have to hit some QTEs, and if it's not done properly, he's shot and killed. Once the 3 pirates regain control, they locate the Manchurian gold document and want to find the treasure. Suddenly, a massive freighter appears nearby, and the pirates force everyone aboard as they're jump scared by a corpse, who is counted already in the prologue. The curator compliments my survival instincts and emphasizes how terribly the situation could have turned out. Before they leave the Duke of Milan, they make sure no one can escape by taking the distributor cap out, and they all take in the creepiness of the ship. One of my favorite aspects of this game comes in its setting. The ship is an amazing horror environment, made even better by the fact it's based around the mystery of the SS Orang Medan. No records of such a ship ever existed, but regardless, stories swirled about a ship that disappeared around the East Indies in the 1940s after its entire crew perished under mysterious circumstances. After a distress signal went out reporting the crew's demise, the ship was boarded by Americans to find the ship littered with corpses with no signs of physical harm, but every single one lay on their backs, mouths agape and staring up at the sky. Before the American vessel could prepare to tow the ship to a harbor, a fire broke out that led to an explosion, sending the Orang Medan to the bottom of the ocean. Hazardous cargo is believed to be the cause of death to everyone on board. However, many agree the story is not based in fact due to records of the ship being non-existent, and the American vessel that supposedly stopped to examine the ship also contains zero record of the event ever happening. Unluckily for our characters here, the ship and the situation they find themselves in is very real. They're forced into a room where they can quickly begin looking around, after the pirates are polite enough to give them a light.
Oh. Thanks.
Alex takes the opportunity to apologize to Fliss for accusing her of working with the pirates, but it's a pretty lackluster attempt. Conrad finds a vent in the corner, and while Alex Hulk smashes through it, Conrad yells at their captors to mask the sound.
Because he will.
Okay, thanks, Brad. They climb through the hole, and Conrad covers up their escape route right in time. After a few minutes of wandering, they enter a large cargo hold and hide out of sight as they watch Olsen place the distributor cap down. Since they can't leave without it, Fliss climbs down as soon as she can, and Brad again tries to help unprompted, with both of them getting caught. The other three stay out of sight and try to follow, but wind up in a room containing some caskets. Alex decides to open one, revealing a strange skeleton, but this won't be counted since they weren't killed during the events of the game. This is when the game starts to pick up as the characters begin experiencing strange events like the soldiers did in the prologue. This is also where they encounter their first actual corpse, and I'm going to take a moment here to add the entire crew of the ship to the count, which had a total of 36 known inhabitants during the prologue. But since I counted 11 already, we'll see an increase of 25 kills here. Confirmed by the wiki, they can be found through exploration, through clues, and the comic. Conrad randomly disappears, leaving Alex and Julia to explore together. Then it cuts to Fliss and Brad being led through the ship by Pirate Danny. He also begins seeing things, but we witness his madness through Fliss's POV, which has him running around the corner and firing his gun at seemingly nothing. But when they round the corner, it's like he just vanished, only leaving him behind his flashlight and hat. The ship is a big fan of the Offspring and has to keep our characters separated, so Brad, being a big PT fan, finds himself in a looping hallway. Each time it ends with a dead soldier, but the fourth time shows his brother. He finally gets through that nonsense, only to find himself in the presence of some not so dead bodies. He jumps as we jump to Fliss passing through the same hallway, which has grown hands, and burps in Fliss's face. She gets free and right into the hands of some zombies, who quickly lose their grasp of her, but when she turns around, she sees Brad and reaches for him, only for him to pull the same shit he did during the ghost story. The room after that contains some lovely decorations. She finds a door that leads outside and gets some fresh air, which clears her head enough to see the room as it actually is, locating the leaking chemical known as Manchurian gold in an old casket. Soon after, Fliss runs into Brad, who is panicking dangerously, swinging a large wrench at her, which she has to dodge. As you can imagine, this can lead to her death if Brad connects with her head, but it can also lead to Brad's death if Fliss is still hallucinating and stabs him. There's actually a whole chapter that's not even present in my game because Brad and Fliss don't recognize each other during this scene. In that chapter, either one can die again by drowning, but in my game, Brad misses Fliss and after 3 attempts decides to run away. Fliss gives chase and we go back to Julia and Alex, who are being tailed by Olsen, who takes the ground out from under them. They fall into the water, which art director Robert Craig explains made him nervous when he first learned of the planned setting for the game. Water is notoriously difficult to get right in games, but when so much of the game deals with water, it makes it a larger challenge. In order to create realistic character movements on the boats, they used motion capture on their actors and placed them on a movable platform to mimic a swaying boat on water. And since they knew characters would be swimming, they needed plenty of footage of people swimming naturally. So they used cameras underwater to film how people swim and mimic those movements during their animations. Julia's first hallucinations begin as she hits the water below, seeing a dead Alex and 2 others with her in the water, with one choking the other. She simply watches, finding it a little hot, and once second Alex has properly been choked, they climb out. Olsen soon follows and plops second Alex on the ground and then follows them like a slasher villain. As they run, we link up with Conrad, who is happy talking to himself, but quickly realizes he's not alone. In a complete twist, Conrad runs from the sexy ghost instead of hitting on it, but she's very persistent and sends him through a series of QTEs. There's a few different ways Conrad's life can end here, whether it's through failed QTE or just by making the incorrect decision. He can get impaled, smash his head, or perform a leap of faith that ends in doom. There's alternative deaths here as well, with either Fliss or Brad getting their throat slit by a horrified and hallucinating Conrad. In my game though, he climbs as high as he can go, and has to choose between jumping or confronting the ghost. Seeing no way to survive by jumping, I have him confront her and he quickly realizes it was Fliss this whole time. She helps him down as we cut over to Julia and Alex as they conveniently run into the others and lock the door behind them. Although this moment can lead to both Julia's or Alex's death, with either getting killed by Olsen, with Julia either getting stabbed or having her neck broken, whereas Alex can also be killed by him via throat slice or face bashing. The curator checks in, asking if we figured out what's going on, and I tell him that shit was apparent at the very start of the game. He proceeds to tell me things aren't supernatural as they seem and lean scientific and political, but I fucking know already, dude!
Stop it.
Tired of my whining, the curator puts us back with Fliss asking Brad why he lost his mind, and they discuss the various hallucinations they've been seeing. Alex notices a radio tower and suggests they go verify if there's a working radio on board, which there is! He's able to tune it into a military signal and provides their coordinates, but right after doing so the power goes out. As is tradition, Conrad sees a hole that can be entered, but for the first time ever claims he's in no condition to do so. Alex volunteers and Julia does as well. Geronimo! At this point, Alex figures out the fog around the ship is making everyone trip hella balls, which gives them an advantage over any hallucinations they may experience moving forward. He flips the switch and immediately the radio comes back on and Conrad resumes telling the military about their situation, who confirms a rescue team is on their way. Now needing to find another way back up there, Alex and Julia find a rebreather that still has some juice left, but Danny sure as hell doesn't. They spot the distributor cap as Olsen loses his mind, starting another heartbeat sequence that they pass successfully. Once there's some distance between them, they run and put a heavy metal door between them, but there's a third pirate still on board, and this dude has a gun. Junior is Olsen's younger brother, and he too is losing his shit, but he's also aware that the fog is causing the horrors he's experiencing, and thinks maybe using the gun to get the fog out of his system is the best way to go. This scene can end several ways depending on which characters are present, with Julia, Alex, Brad, or Fliss eligible to get shot by Junior. There's also a way to keep him alive here, where he makes it all the way to the end and leaves with the group, but not on my watch. Immediately after his death, they watch Olsen sprinting in another direction with the cap in hand and puts us back in Conrad's shoes, who is finally ready to jump down the hole. Soon after doing so, he follows the sound of Olsen's voice, who begins pounding away at this door. He breaks it and Julia just casually slides into the room while Conrad and Olsen wrestle for control of the cap. Eventually, Conrad yells at Julia to get ready to slam the large cargo door behind him, which crushes Olsen for an instant kill. Conrad snatches the cap and they all get together as Dawn greets them outside, and they sail away on Fliss's boat, with all 5 of them still alive. That final scene has a lot of different ways it can pan out, however, and I just happened to get the optimal ending, but a combination of any of the 5 characters can be present during that scene, and all of them have different ways they can die. Conrad has 3 ways: getting crushed like Olsen did, being choked to death, or electrocuted, whereas the other 4 main characters have a 4th method, which is death by sledgehammer. There's yet another chapter that was completely gone in my playthrough titled Matter of the Heart, and this will only occur if Alex stayed in the radio room. That can wind up with his death, Julia's, Conrad's, or Fliss's deaths as well, due to some hallucinations. Olsen will die no matter what, but the way he dies can change too, with electrocution and a good old-fashioned heart attack claiming him depending on the scene. While they sail away, Conrad is back to his usual self, asking if anyone wants to knock back a frosty amber liquid, as it sends us to the credits, and the curator congratulating me on keeping these morons alive, and suggests that anyone watching this hit every button below, except the dislike button, unless you want to wind up on the count. But we're not quite done yet. If Julia was too impatient to decompress when diving and down some of that amber liquid, then she dies of decompression sickness. There's an alternative ending that has any combination of the survivors still aboard the ship when the military shows up. One has them all jailed, but another has them shot and killed by the soldiers for knowing too much about the ship and its contents. However, in my game, they land their chopper on the ship to find it empty, except for a surprise Danny that comes in and murders both soldiers to end the game with a couple of kills. And that also means Danny's death was a fake out and has to be removed, which brings the final total to 43. And that's where Man of Medan ends. I was highly critical of this game when it first released, and that's probably just because Until Dawn is so good. This is my second time playing it, and I enjoyed it a lot more in the variety that it offers. Having it be such a short game lends itself to replayability in order to try all the various combinations. It took me 3 hours and 40 minutes to finish the game, which gives us a kill on average every 5.12 minutes. The majority of the deaths counted in the game will always happen. There's just no way to change what will happen on the ship, or Olsen's fate. Danny will either die or get stranded on the ship, but Junior, Alex, Brad, Julia, Fliss, and Conrad can all survive. This means the minimum kill count will include Danny's death as he's choked out by a dead Olsen and puts the final total at 41. But a maximum kill count ensures everyone dies and puts that total at 47. I'll continue the Dark Pictures anthology next week with little hope. Thanks as always for watching. I'm King Deschain, signing off for now.